Kia ora, talofa, haere mai. Welcome to the year 2022, 2022. What a time to be alive. We are here. And if you haven't caught the vibe already, shit is crazy. We've just had Bangladesh win a game of test cricket in Aotearoa, and that's what we're going to speak about the most on today's episode of the Niche Cast. But obviously, I'm just going to hijack a little bit of mindfulness here, wildcard. If you haven't caught the vibe already, 2022 is starting in hostile, crazy, weird, funky fashion. And it's just that time of year. We've got a lot of weird shit happening. And I think some of the themes around some of the weird shit in Kiwi sport, wildcard, we might be able to tie into Blackcaps stuff as well. Otherwise, it's just a fucking crazy time to be alive. And I'm kind of just referring back to the fact that we started 2022. That alone is bonkers. And we're deep into this decade. Shout out to the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/elnichecache. EL Niche Cache is the best way to support the Niche Cache, the Niche Cast, our podcast, our blogs, and everything else we do. Support it via Patreon. Shout out to the Patreon whānau. We'll be back, swinging back around with the regular scheduled programming next week. So make sure you check out the Patreon podcast if you are a member of the Patreon whānau. And if you do want to support the Niche Cache for the beauty and the honor of Aotearoa sport, broadcasting Aotearoa sporting excellence, join the Patreon whānau, patreon.com/EL Niche Cache. And every Monday and Friday, we deliver an email banger. Those email bangers kept coming over Christmas and New Year's, and we got a fresh email banger coming tomorrow. And those are where you get the frequent, hard and fast tidbits of Kiwi sporting information that we always share as well. So Monday and Friday evening, sign up thenichecache.substack.com and you just get some Kiwi sports information, Kiwi sports yarns, and whatever else we want to fucking write about via the email banger. So sign up thenichecache.substack.com. And of course, we're always writing about Aotearoa sports at theniche-cache.com. The Wildcard has written about the Wellington Phoenix, men and women. He's written about New Zealand Breakers. He's got a massive focus on Stephen Adams as well. All that stuff is live at theniche-cache.com. I just did a 5 things from the Blackcaps loss to Bangladesh, so that is live as well. And a lot of domestic cricket, a lot of Super Smash, a lot of Ford Trophy, a lot of Halliburton Johnston Shield yarns are also live at theniche-cache.com, including a big old Finn Allen yarn. Funky old cricketer Finn Allen in Aotearoa domestic cricket. We start our podcast with a splash of mindfulness. And wildcard, for our first piece of mindfulness for 2022, what have you got?
What have I got? I've got the master, Mr. Alan Watts, who said, "Let everything be free to be just as it is. Do not separate yourself from the world and try to order it around."
Let everything be free just as it is, because like nature's perfect, right? Everything in nature is you look at you can look at something as simple as a leaf and you'll find the symmetry, and everything's perfect there. You can look at something as how the seasons come and go, how things are in tune with the seasons. Everything is perfect, and if nature and the universe is perfect, why would you want to change it? So just let it be as what it is. And as I'm talking through that, the second part of your mindfulness was a bit of a doosra. How did you interpret that second little bit there?
The second bit, don't separate yourself from the world and try to order it around. I mean, it's a doosra, but it's a doosra that's set up by the stock ball earlier on the over of the first one. You know, there's still a one flows on into the next one. Doosra is a lot more dangerous if you've set them up with the ball that's chopping back in towards off stump each time, force the fellow to play, and then get him nudging forward, catch the edge.
Or the old Wagner, full ball, short
or the
ball.
Wagner, yep, there you go. The setup, Tim Southey does it as well all the time. And angling in, Tim Southey angling away, and then the one that's pushed on towards the stumps, being LBW, there you go. It's just, what am I saying? Do not separate yourself from the world and try to order it around. Like, that's just simple. Don't act like you're better than nature, isn't it? is like that we start off from the idea that nature is perfect, which is a nice way to summarize it, because I got that from a book that I'm reading by Alan Watts, where he spends a long time talking about like the history and the concepts of Zen, of I don't know what the school of Zen, the way of Zen, I think is what the book is called, the way of Zen. And he kind of he takes like 50 pages to get around to that very point, which is like I think more a Taoist thing than a Buddhist thing, but it's like nature is perfect, like it was already perfect. You don't have to do anything to it. In which case, obviously, if you start trying to do stuff to nature and messing about and trying to mine it for resources, for example, if you want to take an ecological point of view, or just on a like individual perspective, just like separating yourself by, because as soon as you try to do stuff to something, like you are separating yourself just from that very intention, let alone what happens next from the action itself. So the more separate you are, the more you try to manipulate nature, the more you distance yourself away from that original like nugget of just like nature was already perfect. Like you don't have to do any of this stuff. You're just putting yourself further and further away from I don't know, what do we call the point at the middle of the graph, like the inner peace or whatever. You're just taking yourself further and further away from that.
Nature is perfect. And the nature that we have been dealing with is a Bangladesh test victory in Aotearoa. And it generally just felt like a perfect situation. And I want to be crystal clear and bigging it up to Bangladesh. Like before we go any further, Wildcard, let's just speak about Bangladesh for a second, because we do see a lot of Bangladesh in Aotearoa, and we also see a lot of Sri Lanka. We also see a lot of Pakistan, less so India. But let's be honest, fuck India, fuck Australia, fuck England. We're like the, we're the mindful, beautiful souls of the second tier of world cricket. So we welcome these teams. We welcome
we're Jon Snow leading the wild men sort of thing.
Oh, bloody oath. That's exactly what we are. Aotearoa Blackcaps, Aotearoa Cricket, Jon Snow leading the those north of the wall, but also incorporating the lower people of society, the people who are sent to the wall as well, the have-nots, those type of people. And that's kind of New Zealand cricket. That's what we're doing in the big world of international cricket. And we see a lot of Bangladesh, right? So I know who Tuscan Ahmed is, because he's a young seamer who often plays in New Zealand, because that's what you need. We know who Mushfiqur Rahim is, because we've seen him a fair bit. We know who these other guys are who aren't playing. Who's the batter? Not Shakib Al Hassan. There was another really good batter. Mamadullah. Like those type of lads, we see a lot of them, and we know a lot about them.
And Tamim Iqbal as well, isn't here?
Iqbal as well. This Bangladesh team feels a bit different. Like they had this energy where they wanted to compete, and when they had ascendancy, when they had momentum, they were willing to dominate further. And they had that, they had a level of grit that ensures that, yeah, we've got a bit of domination here. We've got some momentum. Let's fucking hammer down. They also have the grit in the sense of, okay, New Zealand has a bit of an advantage. Let's sustain our high level of play, and let's, when we can, counterattack. So if there is a big partnership emerging, let's take a wicket to counterattack that little partnership. Or when we're batting and we're facing good New Zealand bowling, let's try to counterattack and play some shots. And I think that's what you saw with someone, especially I think it was Liton Das. He was quite attacking. And then you had someone like Shanto, who just looks like a free-flowing batsman as well. And so it was a case of another youngish Bangladesh team coming to Aotearoa, seamers that we generally haven't really heard of, who get their first crack in Aotearoa and haven't really done much. Like some of the stats prior to this test, when you see Tuscan coming up for his first over, or Shariful or Ebadot, these lads had not done a whole lot in test cricket prior to this test. But the thing about this Bangladesh team is they had a certain level of mana. They had that competitive spirit. They were willing to dominate further, and double down on advantageous positions in the test, as well as being willing to counterattack. And we see this like when you do watch a team tour to Australia and play against Australia, touring teams don't counterattack against Australia. That doesn't really happen. And we see that in New Zealand when touring teams like Bangladesh in the past, like Sri Lanka, even Pakistan to some extent, they don't necessarily counterattack. They might stay in the test. Like I think back to the Bay Oval test last year, you had Pakistan, they had good moments. Like they took wickets, they scored a lot of runs as well. But they didn't necessarily counterattack to put pressure back on New Zealand. They just continued to, maintain a good level of performance. Whereas this Bangladesh team wildcard, it felt different. And it felt like a team that had belief, they had faith, they had trust in each other and their skills. They had good guidance. Like Mominal's the captain, but you saw a lot of Mushfiqur Rahim laying down the law. You saw him quite... there was one instance where the dude at the fine leg boundary was on the boundary talking to the 15th man carrying the water, and then you just saw Mushfiqur Rahim absolutely unload on him, like waving his hands, like lots of gestation and lots of energy, which like all these teams have compared to Kiwis. We're not the most passionate, emotive people, but he was basically laying into the fine leg to come 5 meters off the boundary instead of being on the boundary. And that type of shit where you see like you've got the captain, Mominal, led from the front, 88 runs. And then you've got someone else like Rahim, another leader, someone else instilling belief. You got the coaches, Domingo, Otis Gibson, those type of lads. You could sense that this was a Bangladesh team that they believed in themselves and also wanted to express their talents either with bat and ball or with their mentality and grit and fight and domination or counterattacking as well. So it was a fun Bangladesh performance, I reckon, all round.
Yeah, frustrating if you're on the other side of it, because it was like, their first innings, it was just like the Blackcaps couldn't get 2 quick wickets. They might get 1, but they would work so hard for 1, and then immediately another partnership comes in, and like that level of just grittiness, I suppose. Like, because it wasn't all. There was certainly some free-flowing moments. The dudes you mentioned, especially coming in the middle order, the top order kind of just locked it down. They just it was a lot of just really disciplined batting. Like we know, like, because they'd already bowled once at that point. They knew that the ball swung a bit for the first 10 to 15 overs, and then kind of just like I guess they talk a lot in Kiwi home stuff about like when the lacquer comes off the ball sort of thing. After that first like 10 to 15 over period, didn't do a whole lot. More so as the test went on, I think, because just the intense sun started to dry the pitch out and crack it a little bit. But definitely at that time, like it was just solid disciplined batting. The Blackcaps didn't really have an answer because their stock thing is like solid disciplined bowling. And it's like, what happens when a movable object meets an unstoppable force? Like, what happened in this case is that the Blackcaps' unstoppable force got stopped because they couldn't find a way through in the way that normally, like, because it felt for a lot of that time, I guess, because of the habits of seeing this Blackcaps team go, like, what was it, 17 games in a row at home without defeat. It felt like at some point the crumble would happen, and they've had close test matches in that spell before. Not too many where they were really threatened to lose, but definitely a couple where they won. Where in fact, both the games they've played at Bay Oval before, kind of a perfect example, really. One was against England, one was against Pakistan. The England test came down to like having to bowl England out on the last day, and they got there just in time. The Pakistan test came down to having to bowl Pakistan out on the last day, and they got there with like 10 minutes to spare or something like that, craziness. And it sort of felt like at some point that would happen with Bangladesh, and it never did. And that's like, that's just a massive rap to throw their way, because we've seen teams that on paper look a whole lot better than this team, because that's what people were saying when Bangladesh are turning up. It's like it's Bangladesh who always lose when they come here, but not only that, it's not even Bangladesh's top team, and yet dudes just stepped up. Dudes like didn't give an inch, and the Blackcaps kind of got caught out being like in the give and take there, the Black Caps gave up a little bit more than they ordinarily would have. And I don't know. I'll ask you in a sec if maybe you thought there was complacency there. I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. But I do want to highlight just one other thing about Bangladesh. Seeing them like win a major test match like this is like, for more than anything you can say, because I don't think this really affects the Black Caps' trajectory. I think they're still the team that they were. They didn't have Kane Williamson. They'll most pitches and home conditions are going to offer a little bit more to their seamers than that. Blah blah blah. I don't think Ajaz Patel playing would have made any bit of a difference. Doesn't like that stuff doesn't really matter. It's just a few things went against them throughout the test match, and they didn't necessarily respond in the best way. Like this, regardless of all of that, I think this is a thing to be celebrated more than anything, to see Bangladesh win, because once upon a time, like, this was the Black Caps too. The Black Caps famously went, like, I think it was 26 years before they won their first test match. Like, they've been the minnow team that toured everywhere. Other teams didn't really want to play them. Australia came here and smashed us one time and didn't play us again for 20 more years or something like that at one point. Not in an official test match anyway, just A-Tour type stuff. They went to England and got smashed. And then when they went back to England the next time, they were playing like 3-day test matches, because England were like, well, this is all you really deserve, effectively. Like, not in those words, but effectively that's what was going on. And then they had I think a famous tour in like the 40s where they drew every test match. There was a lot of weather stuff in England helping them out in that case. But it was like one of those things of, this is probably before they were even called the Black Caps. Like, this is a touring New Zealand team in England who have to prove that they're not just like a charity case. They're out there trying to battle away and not necessarily playing for wins even in that scenario. But just like, we need to get these draws just to prove to England that we can actually play cricket. And next time they went back, they were getting longer test matches and stuff. And eventually they did win a test match against the West Indies at Eden Park about a year after they were bowled out by England at the same venue for 26, which is still a world record for the lowest ever score. Like, the history throughout cricket in this country, there's like, Bangladesh have gotten to be a competitive test match team a lot quicker than we did. And Sri Lanka got to that point a lot quicker than we did as well. Like, I would imagine Afghanistan and Ireland are probably on similar trajectories. Like, this is the kind of story we can tell throughout the history of the sport, and the New Zealand cricket team has been that team in the past. And so to see like that from another team, I think if you sort of keep that wider context of history, it's kind of, it's very cool to see that. It's not passing the torch, because the Black Caps, we still expect them to be a very good team, probably expect a very good bounce back in the second test in Christchurch, where I would imagine the conditions will be a little bit tougher for those Bangladeshi batsmen. But wanted to highlight that point of, like, once upon a time, this Bangladesh team getting this type of result, like, this is where the Black Caps were once upon a time, and just kind of the cyclical nature of sport, I guess.
To answer your question about Black Caps complacency, to me, this just felt like a culmination of a lot of different factors and like a perfect storm, as opposed to anything super negative about the Black Caps.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
And I think the history that you outlaid right there tells that story. Because as we know, in dealing with New Zealand sport, a lot of these teams have years of ancestral trauma built in. So we know about the Warriors, right? Like, that's the usual example. And now we're seeing a lot in Kiwi cricket as well, where we have like just a great abundance of relative abundance of talent, and we've got success. And we also have this like period where New Zealand wasn't very good at cricket, and we didn't have all that. So I think what you're seeing in any kind of negative press or media or just outlandish hot takes about the Black Caps is you're seeing a lot of that kind of trauma and that experience of the past built in now, because people are like, oh my God, the Black Caps lost the test. It's all over. Like, the run's over. Like, we're not good at cricket anymore. Oh my God. Like, it's like
condition reflexes, eh? Like,
yeah, but it's like it stems from a place of such trauma and scarcity and lack that's how it is. Where I look at this test and I see, if you're going to say one pitch, if Bangladesh, India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Afghanistan, UAE, whoever the fuck wants to tour Aotearoa from that region of the world, maybe even the West Indies, if they are touring New Zealand and you say you have one pitch to select a one-off test against the Blackcaps, you're going to select Bay Oval. But because it is the most similar pitch to Bangladesh, it is the most similar pitch to India, it's the most similar pitch in Aotearoa to West Indies. And I think that is a major factor.
Tempted to chuck South Africa in there as well.
Is there, well, they still got a lot of seamers. Like I'm not sure what's happening against India right now.
Less so, but
yeah, but like then you're getting into like a basin reserve territory, right? Like there's degrees of Aotearoa pitches, and that's a beautiful thing about Aotearoa cricket right now. One test in Bay Oval is the most similar pitch to Bangladesh conditions. Next test, Hagley Oval, Hagley Park, pure Aotearoa cricket right there. So you're getting that variation in pitches and grounds in Aotearoa, which I think is really fun for test cricket in Aotearoa. But yeah, so like I just think this test was a perfect storm for Bangladesh, where, let's be honest, they had the advantage of conditions. Now, if you do want to be critical about the Blackcaps, they knew all this. Like I can say for a fact right now, Bay Oval expects spin. We've had 3 tests there. Like we have some sort of historical data about what that pitch does. And we were saying that it's already Aotearoa's most spinny pitch prior to this test. Now, the Blackcaps have lost a test there, kind of due to the fact that it was spinny, variable bounce. It was kind of low and slow at points as well, hot, dry. Those are all foreign ideals that we're just getting used to in Aotearoa cricket. And we have to expect Bay Oval to spin. We now have, it's a fact, to the point where you should probably be selecting a frontline spinner for the Bay Oval, because we now have like data. We've all witnessed it. Like we've literally seen what happens at the Bay Oval over 3 tests. England came here, Jack Leach and Joe Root were bowling. Mitchell Santner played against England, played against Pakistan, and had maybe his best performances in Aotearoa at that test. Now we've got Bangladesh embracing those conditions to the fullest and winning a test. So we just have to store that away. And I'm saying that as a reminder for myself. Like this is a note in my noggin, my Kiwi cricketing brain, where it's like, Bay Oval, we know what to expect. There's no surprise there. It's not, and this is where I get into like, yeah, you could get a bit niggly towards the Blackcaps, because the Blackcaps came to the Bay Oval and they were like, oh, we thought it might be a bit more seam friendly. Well, I'm sure you did. But like, what happened in the last 2 tests there? What happened? Like, what's the weather conditions in Tauranga? Fucking sunny every day, almost 30 degrees most days. Like those things are just kind of fact at this point. And that was the weird thing. Like, to go back to your question, I don't think it was complacency by the Blackcaps. It was just a strange mix. It was a strange mix of slightly misreading what was going to happen in the conditions and the pitch, and just a strange, Kane Williamson's not there, right? Like little things like that culminated in what happened. And I want to get your thoughts on the spin situation. So if it is a bit more seam friendly, then the deciding factor between playing Daryl Mitchell and Rachin Ravindra, definitely play Ravindra in seam friendly conditions. And you're probably going to see Daryl Mitchell, I'd say, play at Hagley, because they're gonna go hundies on the seam and swing. And if they're going hundies on the conditions, makes sense to go hundies on the bowling attack as well.
And also strengthening your batting attack, just sneakily.
Ravindra's not the worst. Like,
No, he's not, but
had
he's
some
very
moments.
new, young,
Yeah.
inexperienced.
And
Mitchell
that's an
has a test
important.
100, etc.
We'll get to like the batting and the young batting stuff in a jiffy as well. It soon became apparent in that test, Ajaz Patel probably should be there ahead of Ravindra. Like that, the conditions were so extreme that it goes away from our all-rounder needs to bowl spin to we need to have a frontline spinner. Like there's kind of a New Zealand scale, right? Like super Aotearoa conditions, you want Daryl Mitchell, Con de Gronholm. Okay, slightly, if the pitch is a bit more spin friendly, you're still going to have your four seamers. Then you've got Ravindra or Santner in the past, which has happened a lot. And then there's another level, another step, another extremity where it's this pitch is going to spin and we need a frontline spinner. And I think the Blackcaps, obviously, they just misread the extent of that, the conditions were going to be. Are you like of the opinion that Ajaz Patel definitely needed to play in this test? Or you kind of, just how do you feel about that spin situation? Because Ravindra didn't take a wicket either. So when Aotearoa bowled Bangladesh out, all the wickets were taken by seamers. So it's like, you could like, we could want a frontline spinner, but if in the first innings, the seamers still took all the wickets. It's like, I think this sums up the convoluted nature of the test and why we can't overreact and why we have to celebrate Bangladesh, because it is what it is. But I am curious just to get into the nitty gritty of some of your thoughts around that spin situation, given we probably won't have to talk about spin much like at Hagley in the coming week.
Yeah, it's one of those, if you were gonna, because South Africa are coming here afterwards for the other two test matches of this summer. One is also at Hagley, I believe, and the other one's at the Basin Reserve. So if you're not picking a spinner for Bay Oval, first test of the summer, you're probably not picking a spinner for any of the other three as well. I mean, maybe if you decide that you need the, I don't know, the variation or whatever, but that's effectively why Ravindra was in there. And I expect they from day one decided we'll pick Ravindra for the first one, we'll pick Mitchell for the second one. I reckon that was the plan, regardless of what happened in this test match, and I expect that's what we'll see. In which case, it's like, why'd you pick Ravindra over Mitchell when Mitchell was probably the better number 6/7 batsman right now? I mean, it's so that he can bowl those spin overs. It's that same sort of Mitchell Santner-esque role again of just pick a spinner, but pick a spinner who's the best batter of the spinners. Ravindra got a lot of overs, a lot more than I expected, because those previous two test matches that you talked about, Mitchell Santner, I looked this up not that long ago, Mitchell Santner I think he took 3 wickets in each of the second inningses on the way to bowling teams out for one. Definitely got 3 for against England. I know that was for sure. He got the last wicket against Pakistan because they kept playing it over and over on the coverage. I can't remember what his overall figures were, but I do know that he bowled, I think, 6 overs in each of the 2 first inningses of those matches. Like, he wasn't even a factor until the second innings, until the pitch had dried out and whatever. So I think maybe that's part of the consideration as well, is like, if you're only picking them for a 4th innings, or then maybe you just back yourselves to get the job done in the first 3 inningses. And in this case, I would argue that the Blackcaps fell behind in this test match and never got back on the in the ascendancy of it in the first innings, and relatively early on in the first innings as well. But I mean, I'll come back to that idea in a sec. As to the spin, I don't know. I think I probably respectfully disagree with you there. I don't think Ajaz Patel makes a difference to this. Ravindra bowled a lot of overs, but he didn't look like taking a wicket at any point. He felt like he was a stock bowler, just getting through the overs to allow the other dudes to, the seamers, to have a bit of a rest and come back. And like, if you were to pick Ajaz Patel, it might. I just don't know that they would with their batting lineup as it is. And we did see like a little bit of a, once they got into the middle order, Bangladesh, and middle and lower order, there wasn't necessarily the scrappiness that we often see from the Blackcaps. like Brendan McCullum made a point about his favorite cricketer BJ Watling not being there, and I think that's a pretty valid point. Like, we know what BJ Watling has done so many times is just coming in there and like arrest the collapse. He wasn't there to do that. Like, so if you were to pick Ajaz Patel, I don't think he comes in for Rachin Ravindra. I think Mitchell would have to play in that case, and for Ravindra, and then Patel would have to come in for one of the 4 main seamers. And then who do you drop there? Do you drop Kyle Jamieson, test average of like 16? Do you drop Neil Wagner, who just didn't play, who like just had to sit on the sidelines watching 2 games in India, where he's absolutely fired up, and this is his home ground, same as it is for his adopted home ground now. He lives there locally, same as Trent Boult, same as Tim Southee, same as Kane Williamson, Colin de Grandhomme, all these dudes. Like, do you? I mean, you can't. You've got Neil Wagner all fizzed up. You got to pop the cap. You got to pop the cap off of that one. You can't just leave him there, or the can's going to explode. But then you have to drop Southee or Boult in that case, and like how Southee's been the best test bowler. Besides, like if you take Jamieson has only been the last couple of years, if you go over the last 5 or so years, Tim Southee's been the dude. And Trent Boult is traditional, like he's got the best average of all those dudes over again, disregarding Jamison's sort of like recency bias. Like, I just don't see how you could pick Ajaz Patel ahead of any of those guys. So I think it is a convoluted, difficult situation. But then also at the end of at the end of the day, I just also don't see Ajaz Patel. Like, he might have got a couple wickets. He'd have been much more threatening than Rachin Ravindra. I don't see him making a difference though. And even from Bangladesh's point of view, like Mahedi Hassan is an excellent spin bowler. We've seen this from him before. Like I think he was, he played in those 2020s, didn't he? Before the 2020 World Cup when New Zealand went over there, he was fantastic. Like, he was unhittable. He's a great player, can bat a bit too. So like, excellent. They're like, he's the dude who's coming through when Shakib Al Hasan is done. Like, he's just going to pick up that, where he won't be as good a batsman, but he'll pick up a similar role in that team. He took 3 wickets in the first innings, none in the second. Like, it was the seamers who were rolling through the Blackcaps when they were the team that collapsed in the third innings. Like, there's dudes like Eberdod and what did he take, like 6 or 7 for or something like that. Like, that was where the damage was done. It wasn't the spin bowlers in the end. The pitch did turn. The pitch certainly did offer some stuff to these spinners. I mean, in the end, the seamers did the damage again. It was just the seamers from the team opposite to what we normally expect them to do. So I don't know that Ajaz Patel would have made a difference. And I think like I sort of hinted at before, I think the Blackcaps sort of fell behind early in the test match, getting a little bit messy in their batting, and because they were in such a good position. I don't have the scorecard in front of me at the moment, but like, they were I don't know, 150 odd for 1 or something, like, or for 2. No, Conway was batting at 3, wasn't he? So for 1, Will Young and Devon Conway putting on a good partnership, looking like they were never going to get out. Will Young runs himself out, but stupidly, with, still hasn't got a test century, and I think maybe he's feeling that a little bit, but it was just a bit of a random run out thing. He turned a little slow, maybe he needed to dive, whatever, got caught just short. Conway goes on to get a lovely 100, but then gets out, and then Nichols has to bat with the tail with a nice odd 50, like, what did he get, 70 odd or something like that, but then he's out reverse sweeping at the end, like last wicket, because everyone else has just been falling around him. What should have been 450 plus was about 330, 340 or something like that. Like, they were at least 100 runs short on where they should have got to from that first innings. Bangladesh come out, didn't get a century maker, but put on 450 odd. Like, they scored the total that New Zealand should have scored, and then from there were able to play from a big lead and control the test match, and just like their steady stock, like, just to be fair, they got more swing out of it than the Kiwi bowlers for a lot of that test match as well. The timing of that was good. The winning, like, if I want to roll off another few reasons why this was a bit of an unlucky test match, bit of a write-off test match for the Blackcaps. Bangladesh winning the toss was a big advantage for them, because New Zealand weren't able to hammer it home in the first innings. Because of that, Bangladesh got to bat during the best time to bat, and then got to bowl during the best time to bowl. That helped them. There was the Will Young run out was just touch and go. There was a couple of Neil Wagner ones. There was that no ball, which I just don't, for the life of me, I can't see why that was given as a no ball. For sure, some part of his heel was shadowing the line, but whatever. There was that. There was an LBW that the Blackcaps didn't review off of Wagner that would have been out. There was a what was this? There's at least one other one like that I can't remember. And then just
Will Young run himself out, and then he was dismissed pulling a delivery that stayed low. And Bangladesh dropped a shitload of catches. That was just part of the whole weird.
They dropped some. Weird. They also took a couple of absolute screamers.
But it was just a very weird. A lot of weird.
Yeah, it was, happened. And there were a lot of the reason I list a few of those is because there were a lot of them which just sort of went Bangladesh's way instead of the Blackcaps. And when you've been touring this country probably 4 or 5 times in the last 15 years or something like that, and never won a match or never even drawn a match of any description, you're due a bit of luck. Eventually something like that's going to break for you, and that's fair play to Bangladesh, because luck does not win you test matches. Luck plus excellent execution will win you test matches. The luck certainly helps if you take care of all the things you can control. If you don't, the luck doesn't make a difference, because the next one you're just gonna, you get lucky, dismissed off a no ball, sweet as, big break, but you just chop the next one onto your stumps or whatever, maybe if you're not doing too well. That kind of thing. So that's not to take anything whatsoever away from Bangladesh, because I'm sure other teams have had luck in this streak of the Blackcaps' home unbeaten run and not taken advantage of it at all, and not played nearly as positive a cricket as Bangladesh did as well. But from a Blackcaps point of view, there were definitely a few things which you just think more often than not, they're not going to get that many things kind of conflating against them. It's a couple of those wickets just would have made not just the wickets they didn't get breaking partnerships earlier in Bangladesh, but I mean the Will Young run out changed the course of the game as far as it was on day one, it was early on. But yeah, as I see it, looking at what happened since, I think that was a major turning point in the rest of the contest.
Yeah, so definitely hold fire on some of the batting stuff, but a lot of the stuff you're talking about, like the spin bowling and Ajaz Patel, that sounded like it was from the middle stage of the 3 stages that I laid out, right? You're kind of judging it from that middle stage where there's a bit of spin, so you select Santner or Ravindra.
Yeah.
Bay Oval was the extreme. And yeah, Bangladesh's seamers did the damage, but they're Bangladesh seamers who know how to bowl on slower variable bounce pitches with reverse swing and using their wrist action to dictate where the ball goes. Like Tuscan Ahmed, his wrist action is impeccable. Shoreful is a left armer who moves the ball into left-handers and away from right-handers. Ebadot is your prototypical hostile Asian seamer. Steams in, hits the deck hard in Asian conditions. So the Bangladesh seamers doing the damage, to me, that's more of a product of them being Bangladesh seamers in conditions that are the most similar to Bangladesh. And I just want Ajaz Patel bowling those Ravindra overs in this conditions. Now, if we're playing at base and reserve, if we're playing in Dunedin, then things are skewing. And Ajaz Patel he did play that Birmingham test in England, which to me feels somewhere in the middle. That's kind of a Ravindra Santner type of test. But Ajaz Patel got the game there. He took 4 wickets, but that's not really important in this discussion. But I just watching Ravindra bowl in those conditions. Ravindra's serving up a loose delivery every over.
Yep.
Ravindra's bowling a full toss. He's bowling a short delivery. He's bowling one down leg. Yeah, he might that's the difference between Ravindra and Ajaz Patel. I didn't see Ravindra stack up 3 deliveries with good flight, landing it on a handkerchief, ripping deliveries off the pitch. That's Ajaz Patel's bread and butter, and that is the difference between an all-rounder spinner and a frontline spinner. And in stage 2 of my little mythical pitch condition, Aotearoa pitch condition scale, in stage 2, conditions are still in favor of the seamers to the point where you don't need your spinner to bowl 6 deliveries in the same spot. As soon as you move to stage 3, you need your spinner to bowl 6 deliveries on the same spot, because your seamers aren't necessarily doing the damage or putting enough pressure on to capitalize. And if you've got in stage 2, I just love this little stage condition thing that I've made up. At stage 2, if you're following along,
it's a bit like the signs on the side of the road about like the fire dangers and stuff, eh? Like,
yeah, that's what we've got here.
We're
so
in orange is stage 2, red is stage 3, and
yeah. The oh, you just made me lose my train of thought. Stage 2, you've got a situation where the seamers are like conditions are in their favor. They're applying a lot of pressure, so batsmen then have to take on the part-time all-round spinner. That's how you generate some wickets. That's how you generate a bit of pressure with your spin bowler. Is the seamers apply the pressure, batsmen view the spinner as an outlet. That's how you get some action there. As soon as you go to stage 3, the seamers aren't applying that pressure, and so it's easier to ensure that the spinner doesn't take any wickets and doesn't build pressure. Ravindra is not going to build pressure, and that's fine for stage 1 or stage 2. When you're dealing in, this is a very specific Bay Oval thing, and I can't underestimate how different Bay Oval is to nearly every other pitch in Aotearoa. And if you're dealing in that stage 3 type of extreme circumstance, I think that's when you need a spinner just to bowl 6 deliveries in a row. So that's my case. We've both I think a lot of people are either side of that argument as well. Like a lot of the listeners, a lot of the pundits, a lot of the fans, either way. Because also part of this wild card, and I'm kind of thinking about writing this, Ajaz Patel has not been very good in Aotearoa in domestic cricket. You've done the big yarn on how spinners do in international cricket. I'm looking at Ajaz Patel, who last summer, this is to be expected. So I'm isolating his Super Smash work last summer, 11 games, 7 wickets, and an average of 47. And he has played, I think he's played 3 Super Smash games this summer since returning from his 10-wicket haul, 3 games and 1 wicket. That's Super Smash, right? Like we expect that. I'm going to ask you wildcard, over under. Ajaz Patel. Now, these are kind of small sample sizes, so that's why the number is what it is. Ajaz Patel in the Ford Trophy and Plunket Shield last season. He has not played a game in these competitions this season yet. Both his averages are over this number. What number is this number?
I mean, 1. I'm not wrong, am I? But I guess I got to keep going as high as I can until I can top out. I'm going to say, let's be generous and say 38.
That's very generous. You're a nice guy.
So I can go a lot higher. I got room. 44.
Ajaz Patel averaged, he took 2 wickets at 88.5 in the Ford Trophy last summer. And in the Plunket Shield, he took 2 wickets at 90.
Right. I had a lot more room.
So I'll probably set the mark at 85 average in both formats, which is pretty high. So that is to say, yes, we've got this top level, surface level analysis of Ajaz Patel, where it's like, he took 10 wickets in India. He's amazing. He should be in the squad. And I literally just said why I would have had Ajaz Patel in that team for the Bay Oval Test, as well as me just saying in the last podcast we did of 2021, why Ajaz Patel should not be in that Bay Oval Test, right? Like we've seen how this has played out. But the secondary layer of analysis with Ajaz Patel is that last season, Like he wasn't very good in New Zealand. And I'm fascinated by this. Like I'm exploring this idea because now it sets up Ajaz Patel in this summer of New Zealand domestic cricket, where he has to continue to command selection for the Blackcaps. And that is an interesting dynamic because everyone's kind of saying 10 wickets, he should always be in the team. Yeah, when you think about what Ajaz Patel has done in domestic cricket, he's barely even the best spinner. He's barely even like a top 3, top 4, top 5 spinner. And that's a fascinating dynamic that I'm thinking about. One more quick note here. You mentioned Ravindra bowling more than he should have, or more than you thought he might.
Yeah.
A lot of that seemed like development. Like a lot of, because when I think about Ravindra's plight with the Blackcaps, goes on tour to England. That seems like a clear development step with an Indian series on the radar. Bowles gets a fair amount of game time in India, goes all right. Now they ease him into the Bay Oval Test, and there was a lot of like final over before drinks, give Ravindra a bowl. It just seemed like there was those type of things where we can't just throw Ravindra to the wolves, even though he was kind of thrown to the wolves in India, that type of stuff. But like we're in New Zealand. We've got a strong seam attack. Ravindra is not necessarily a frontline spinner, so we can just ease him in. Here's an over here. Here's an over there. Okay, now you can bowl your 5 over spell. But that's like, this is, again, this shows the differing Turanga Waiwai, maybe, standing points of Ravindra and Patel. Because when you've got Ravindra, you're not thinking, okay, bro, bowl 15 overs and clog up an end. Ravindra can't do that.
Yeah, and they certainly weren't going to attack with him the way you can with Patel. Maybe less so in these conditions for reasons you just highlighted, but at least you're bowling Ajaz Patel with plans on how he's going to take a wicket. I don't necessarily get the feeling that was the case with Ravindra. It was a bit more about like, bowl your stuff, as you're saying, like, but you know, here's a few overs here, here's your little window, bowl your stuff, maybe they'll make a mistake.
Yeah, and it's even like you can kind of double layer it with Ajaz Patel because you can have far more weight on the attacking plans as well as the defensive plans.
Yeah.
Whereas with Ravindra,
not going to be that loose
either.
ball you talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. With Ravindra, you're literally just saying like, do your stuff, and we like it, but you're not going to bowl 10 overs in a row. And so it's just like that. To me, that all goes back to it's just a weird test. It's a weird mix of players in a team, a weird mix of opponent and conditions and everything. You mentioned Brendan McCullum saying something, and I remember,
BJ Walling,
I think that was when he was talking about Will Young and how Will Young, there was some conversation around domestic cricket, and Brendan McCullum was saying the difference between domestic cricket, Test cricket. You kind of got to have your moment in Test cricket where you put your team on your back and you get a positive result. That's like BJ Watling became a legend because as a role player in the Blackcaps, he had his moments of saving a draw, of winning a test with the bat. Like he's not Kane Williamson, he's not Ross Taylor, he's not Tom Latham. But
he had massive partnerships with all of them.
And he had massive moments himself in team success. And this is, I can't remember, I think it was Muhammad Hafiz was saying in something I wrote like a year or two ago. I think he just retired as well. So shout out to him.
He did actually, yeah.
He was saying like the quality of player is determined by how they perform in getting results. Like, what do you do to win a game? What do you do to win a final? What do you do to save a test, win a test? And yeah, we can look at like in this test, Ross Taylor, Henry Nicholls, Tom Latham, they didn't do it. Okay. They didn't stand up and say, no, we're not letting this test fall away. Also, Will Young and Devon Conway did it, and they were probably in the strongest positions. And when you have batters like Will Young and Devon Conway, who are at this stage of their test careers, they are yet to have those moments. And until then, it's hard to really view them in that light, even though they look exceptional. Like Will Young looks fantastic. 250s in this game, looked fantastic in India. Good sweep shots, organized around his off stump, plays the pull shot well. Like, he's the fucking man. He is a really good batter. And I think he is the best equipped batter to open in Test cricket for Aotearoa, alongside Tom Latham. Devon Conway, I think I counted, like he's had 8 innings and 2 centuries and 250s. So literally half of his innings have been 50-plus scores in Test cricket. He averages something like over 60 in all 3 international formats, over 40 in all 3 domestic formats. Devon Conway is fucking slick. He is an exceptional batter.
Well, there's a stat I tweeted out yesterday about Devon Conway. Because he got 200 on debut, right? First innings at Lords. Second highest ever score by a New Zealander in their first innings of Test cricket, because Matthew Sinclair got 214 or something. So second top run scorer after 1 innings. He then can't remember what he did the next time, got 30 odd or something like that, and then he got a 50 in the next test. So Devon Conway had the second most runs for a New Zealand batsman after his first test innings, the most after his second test innings, the most after his third, most after his fourth, most after his fifth, most after his sixth, 7th innings, he got 100. So most after his 7th, 8th innings, out a little bit cheaply in the second innings against Bangladesh. He's now he's first equal after 8 innings with I think it's C.W. Dempsey, something like that. I can't remember what C stands for, probably like Charles or something, because we're going all the way back to the 1930s. Like pre-World War II was the last guy who scored this many runs in that few innings, like the first few innings for the Aotearoa cricket team, to start their Test career. Like, that's nuts. That's insane. And all he's got to do is, well, actually no, because I think I looked at what the 9th and 10th were, and I think Bert Sutcliffe had a massive 5th or 6th test or whatever. So he might need to ton up again next time in Hagley if he wants to stay near the top of the things. But 514 runs, I believe it is, after 8 innings is like unprecedented, almost unprecedented. First equal.
So Devon Conway's 2 centuries in Test cricket have come in draws.
Yes, they have.
At Lords and here at the Bay Oval. So
a draw and a loss.
Yeah, draw and a loss. Sure, I need to rewrite that just quickly. Damn, now I hate myself for my little typo.
That's the worst when you realize it afterwards as well.
So this isn't like anything, like we just literally watched Will Young, one of the most prodigious batting talents since his first-class debut in 2012. We are watching him elevate himself to being a Test opener. We are watching Devon Conway be cricket history himself, like just himself. His batting is cricket history. It's fucking ridiculous. Going back to when he was like leading run scorer in all 3 formats in Aotearoa, like just a couple of years after moving from South Africa. Devon Conway,
I guarantee no one else has ever done that, I mean, the 3 format thing is relatively short, but man,
like he is ridiculous. Both of them are amazing, I think. Both of them deserve to be first 11 cricketers. So, and obviously it's a bit like there's nothing negative about Devon Conway, his centuries coming in a draw and a loss. Like, there's nothing wrong with Devon Conway doing that. But the point here is that neither have yet impacted a positive result. Will Young, Brendan McCullum said that because Will Young had an opportunity to do so in the second innings. If he batted throughout that second innings and he didn't play that pull shot, he just played with a straight bat, he has elevated himself to a neck level where he helped Aotearoa salvage a draw or even win a test. Devon Conway did hit a century, but he didn't do anything to like really take the Blackcaps deep into this test. And I say that because that is the difference between them and Tom Latham. That is the difference between them and Ross Taylor. That is the difference between them and Kane Williamson and Henry Nichols and BJ Watling. That's the difference between Tom Blundell and BJ Watling. Blundell hasn't done much or anything to, I think he had one good one against West Indies, but in slightly more adverse scenarios, he hasn't done the BJ Watling thing. And this, to me, is a key point because we have to I think we just have to adjust our mindset with some of these lads. Like the fact, like we, up until that moment of them having their moment in the sun, celebrating a really gritty draw, celebrating a win through their innings. Like, they can keep scoring runs, but they're not the big Donnies. And in a batting lineup without Kane Williamson and soon to be no Ross Taylor, we're losing a lot of these big Donnies who have done it before. Like, you're basically taking Ross Taylor and BJ Watling, two of the biggest Donnies in this batting lineup. You're taking them out. And that is how you win a World Test Championship. And things have to be kind of adjusted a wee bit when you're bringing in some of these other players like Will Young, Devon Conway, who I just found this test really interesting because they were literally fantastic. They were amazing in this test. However, they could not help the Blackcaps get a draw or a win. And I feel bad because like Will Young run himself out and then misread a delivery off the pitch. And Devon Conway hit a century, and it's hard to say he had a bad test when he hit a century. But like, neither of them have got their test games to the level just yet where they can ride throughout those little waves of momentum and really impact the result in a positive fashion for Aotearoa.
Yeah, I did just check their past numbers because Will Young got, I think, 80 odd in the first innings of the Birmingham Test where the Blackcaps beat England to win that series. That's 80 odd though. What we're talking about, and Devon Conway got a 50 in the first innings of the Test Championship final, which Will Young didn't play. So like, those are nice contributions, but you know, a 50 and an 80 complementary contributions. Like the performance you think of when you think of the Test Championship final is Kyle Jamieson just tearing through the Indian batting lineup. Like, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about like the nice ones that go along with the dude who scores the 100. We're talking about like the dude who scores the big 100 in a win to set, you know, a major total. That's really interesting you say that as well, because I haven't looked it up yet, because it was just an inkling that I had, and now I do want to go dig a little deeper and see if there's something to that, because I wonder if you definitely can't say the same thing about Tom Latham, Ross Taylor, dudes like that for sure have done this in the past. I certainly wonder about Tom Blundell, because, you know, he scored 100 against the West Indies in a massive total where I can't remember who, but at least there might have been 300s in that innings. I can't remember, but, you know, he was a dude coming in at like 6 after the platform had well and truly been set for him. He wasn't the dude getting setting it up. And then he scored a brilliant 100. Like, the most memorable innings of his career was the 100 in the Boxing Day Test at the MCG, where we got fucked up. Like, no one else scored any runs. Like, that's great innings, but yeah, it wasn't leading towards a positive team result or anything like that. And so I guess when you think about those as a player, those kind of ones, it's like, proud of what I achieved there, but like tinge of sadness because of the overall result kind of thing. What you want is to be like the dude dominating and then winning a big test match, and then everyone gets to celebrate with you and it's all good. Tom Blundell certainly hasn't done that the same, and I'm just looking at some of his numbers, and I don't think he's under any drama whatsoever for the South Africa series. But if he doesn't score runs in that South Africa series, I think maybe we start to at least have a conversation there, because since that 100 at the MCG, he's played 11 test matches, some of them opening, some of them batting at 6 or 7. 250s, top score of 64, 334 runs at a 19.64 average. That's over 11 test matches. So just cut out the first 3 test matches of his career. That's what he's done since. The last 5 test matches that he's played, 84 runs at 10.5. Like, he has not been like that, and that's over 8 test innings as well. 84 runs in 8 test innings compared to Devon Conway's last 8 test innings, which is 514 runs. Like, Tom Blundell not been scoring runs. Like, he had a couple innings in India where he stuck in for quite a while. Like, he occupied the crease, as they say, but he didn't score runs. You know, he was battling for 10, 15, 20 overs, but not getting singles or boundaries away to to apply any kind of pressure back to the Indian bowlers. It was just a matter of how much pressure can you personally absorb. And eventually, as I can remember, at least happened to him at least once, you do that, and eventually you get like a ball that just doesn't bounce and goes under your bat, and you're out. Like you're not gonna push back against the momentum in any way. That's eventually one's just going to have your name on it. Tom Blundell for sure is in that boat. I wonder if Henry Nicholls is in. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying I'm just trying to think of the big scores that Henry Nicholls has had in the past and like big memorable winning results. I'm sure there'd be a few. But like games where he was the because he had a couple big hundreds against Pakistan last year, I think. So he's certainly like he's scored runs and wins before. I'm just trying to think of like what his like memorable superstar ones would, because I don't know. I felt when he came to I didn't actually see his innings. I watched it later because I was out, so I missed the end of that day's play for the left when they were like 140 for 2 or something, and thinking they should be able to close out the rest of the day. That'll be all right. Came back and didn't believe the scorecard when I saw it, but it sort of felt like Henry Nicholls could come in and just play that sort of dashing counter-attacking innings, and he didn't. And it just made me wonder. I'm not saying one way or another. I'm saying I need to have a look back at his Test career and see like which of the like how many times, like what is his record in wins and draws and losses and things like that. Yeah, not that he's under any pressure, just saying that he might be one of those dudes who needs a spotlight knock kind of in one of these 3 Test matches for the rest of the summer. Like the thing I did think though, watching like just looking at both of those things, because something I sort of hinted at before is there's a little bit of a soft underbelly to this team, and it does feel like maybe there's a bit of a rejuvenation period going on with the Blackcaps batting lineup. It will happen with the bowling lineup one day. Like Neil Wagner's about 36 or whatever, he won't play forever. If anyone's suited to do a Tom Brady and just play into their 40s, it's him. Like he could just be the New Zealand's Jimmy Anderson, but that's up to him personally and how long he wants to play for. There's more things that just go into it than just physically being capable of continuing to take wickets. So eventually that'll happen with the bowling lineup. Bolt and Southey would both be in their 30s, I assume. Like at some point they have to rejuvenate that as well, but not yet, not for a couple of years. The batting lineup maybe seems like it's going through that at the moment because you've had BJ Watling, because Ross Taylor is now retiring, because there was already like a bit of a mix and match with who the other opener alongside Tom Latham is. And yeah, fully agree. I think we've solved that now. I think I'd actually like to have a look at, see what like the list of partners Tom Latham has batted with as an opener, because I'd imagine there'd be a couple, not so much funky names, but just like to see like which were the successful partnerships and whatever. Because keeping in mind that Devon Conway opened for a couple innings with him, and one of those innings Conway scored a double hundred, so I'd imagine those stats over a small sample size look pretty good. But Will Young and Tom Latham seems like the best opening partnership we've had in quite a long time. Like we've often had one good opener, but here we've got like two who are like. Will Young used to be a number 3 to 4. Is how he came up. It's where he scored most of his runs starting off. But he's made like a concerted effort over the last couple of years to target a Blackcaps Test opening spot, seeing that as his way into the thing. He has a technique that can sort of handle it. He has adapted his game a little bit in order to just mold himself towards that as well. And it's working beautifully. Like this a complete success story. That looks like a great opening partnership going forward. So part of the rejuvenation process is already kind of working. But I look at a team that goes like an order that goes in this case, Nicholls, Blundell, Ravindra, Chuck Jamieson on the end of that at your sort of 5, 6, 7, 8. Little too much in the way of like stroke players and like it's not each one of those dudes is good enough individually to be in that team on merit. It's a little bit of an asterisk on Ravindra because he's a bit of a prospect player as well, but like undeniable talent. Maybe no, and Ravindra is probably the guy because he's ordinarily an opener. He's probably the guy who's best suited to do this. But just stylistically, there's not that variation of someone who can do the knuckle down BJ Watling. We're not going to lose another wicket this session kind of role. Maybe there's a little bit of that in that team. Like lots of good batsmen, but maybe just not not enough variation of style to where someone's just gonna put the clamps on when the clamps need to be put on, you know?
That is not I don't believe that's a stylistic or talent or player thing.
No.
That's an
Well, it could
experience
be
thing. And
yes.
BJ Watling could do that because BJ Watling has opened in Test cricket. BJ Watling has played Test
So
cricket.
Tom Blundell?
Yes, but Tom Blundell is at a very different stage of his career to BJ Watling, and to me, this sums up Test cricket. And like it's the same with Ross Taylor. People like I wrote about Ross Taylor, and then his second innings was extremely frantic, extremely skiddy, and that's Ross Taylor, and that's how he started his innings for the most of his career, right? Like, and people see everyone else scoring runs. People see Devon Conway scoring runs, Will Young scoring runs, and then they instantly, like this prior to Ross Taylor announcing his retirement and everything, and people say, well, Ross Taylor should retire and then Devon Conway can just bat number 4. What? And this idea is present in a lot of different pockets of like Blackcaps cricket, for example. And to me, the most important thing here is Test experience. And BJ, like, it's just so important to have. Like, the Blackcaps won the World Test Championship final with BJ Watling, with Ross Taylor. These dudes know how to bat in Test cricket. And Will Young, Devon Conway, Tom Blundell, they have shown they have the talent to play Test cricket, but to do the thing that you want them to do, to grit their teeth and save an innings or, put some shots away, that only comes with experience. And I'm looking at this Blackcaps team, and like, I don't really care what Tom Blundell does the rest of the summer. I don't necessarily care what Will Young, Devon Conway do the rest of this summer. I just want them to play Test cricket, and I don't want any changes to the batting lineup. Ross Taylor will go out for the South African series, and you're just going to put Kane Williamson number 3, Devon Conway number 4. That's easy. But keep that the same, because you need to give these dudes experience in Test cricket, and we don't play a lot of Test cricket. So the more you chop and change with fewer tests, you're decreasing the opportunity for these players to play Test cricket and learn about Test cricket, because they're all learning. Devon Conway's scoring runs, Will Young scoring runs, Tom Blundell isn't scoring runs, but they're all learning. Tom Latham's still learning. Ross Taylor's still learning about Test cricket. So like, it's kind of, I don't know, I kind of want to say, like, put some of these stats away for some of these batsmen, because as you said, we're in a rejuvenation period of the batting lineup. And these dudes just need to play Test cricket, because we've seen the talent, we've seen the runs, but what we have not seen, especially in this Test showed it, was a knowledge of Test cricket, a knowledge of their game, a knowledge of conditions and how to apply previous scenarios to what they're doing now. All that stuff that you get from playing 3, 4, 5 years of Test cricket, that wasn't there in this Test, but it's going to be there in the future. And I'm reminded of Latuda Ross Taylor, how he like came into Test cricket, played a lot of shots, and then he had to learn how to bat a long time in Test cricket. And that's where Will Young's at. That's where Devon Conway's at. That's where Tom Blundell's at. And they have to learn how to bat a long time in Test cricket. They have to learn how to play their strokes when they need to play their strokes. They have to learn how to shut up shop when they need to shut up shop. And I don't know, there's one, I don't know what this means, wildcard, but I just had this thought. When I watched Devon Conway bat, there's a bit of Colin de Grandhomme to him, where I know exactly what Devon Conway is. So when Colin de Grandhomme comes to bat, you're a fool if you're thinking Colin de Grandhomme is going to save a Test by blocking it out. Like, it's not who he is. We've seen it many times before where he just comes out and smacks it to all parts. That's who he fucking is. And yes, we can want de Grandhomme to bat to save a Test. Yes, we could want him to learn how to bat in Test cricket and all those things. Devon Conway is an extremely gifted run scorer. And that is probably due to how he bats, and how he bats is also going to like put him in some precarious positions. Less so at number 4, I reckon, because if he's coming out to a nibbling ball, he dangles his bat outside his off stump. There's a gap between bat and pad that was exposed in this test, I think, with one coming back in between them, and there's a lot of like friskiness outside his off stump. And that's not anything negative to Devon Conway. That is who Devon Conway is. And I think that also speaks to maybe the soft underbelly that you're talking to, which I just believe is a lack of experience, which is natural. But someone like Devon Conway, who everyone thinks is the man, he's scoring a lot of runs. I think he's the man. At the same time, there are elements of his game that can generate a soft underbelly aspect of the Blackcaps, because Tom Latham in this test, maybe a couple loose shots, couple of loose deliveries, he's out. Then Devon Conway comes in and he's frisky around his off stump. And then suddenly you've got Ross Taylor coming in as well. And he is, I think frantic is an understatement to start his innings. And then Henry Nicholls comes in, he's got a hooping ball coming in at his stumps. And it's kind of like there's no Kane Williamson in that batting lineup. There's no BJ Watling in that batting lineup who are like, they are dams in the river, where the river just has to stop flowing, and that's the wickets. The wickets have to stop flowing, whereas as you saw in that second innings, Devon Conway's not a dam. Ross Taylor's not a dam. Henry Nicholls is not a dam. Tom Blundell's not a dam. And that's where you get into that soft underbelly of wickets falling rather quickly, especially in those conditions. So it's just, I think we just have to grow with this batting unit, especially. We just have to like ride the wave of what this batting unit gives us and exercise some trust that they will get to where we want to get them to get to. I do not think, other than tinkering with the all-rounder role, Daryl Mitchell, Rachin Ravindra, that type of stuff, I do not think, because if you eventually get to the point where you don't want Blundell in the team, well, you have to bring in another dude to start his test career, Dane Cleaver or Cameron Fletcher, those type of characters. And it's just like, well, then you're just starting the cycle of someone else adjusting to test cricket again. Where I think you've got a group who can form the nucleus of a test team over the next World Test Championship cycle. Let them do their thing. Just leave them, let them do their thing and learn about test cricket. It's probably the most important thing, like just learning how to apply your skills to different scenarios is most important.
Yeah, and I fully agree with that as well. Like you don't you can have questions about fly going all over my face here. You can have questions about like some of these things that we've talked about, but like the solution to those questions isn't like drop them, get someone else in. It's like these are it's more like a checklist of these are maybe a couple of things that we need to see from some of these guys going forward. There's especially, I mean, like Will Young doesn't get run out stupidly, taken too long to turn around for a run that was never really on. And even then only just being run out by like less than an inch. It's basically I remember thinking with the Wagner no ball, like, well, at least they're consistent, because the Will Young one, there wasn't much in that either. I thought at least one way or another, they're calling it similarly. But like that, he doesn't get run out there, and then maybe he goes on and scores 150, and it's a different scenario. I think the fly just went in front of the camera there as well. And
Will Young also had the one with Ross Taylor, where he hit it to like gully, and then he was watching the ball.
Where Taylor didn't get run out but should have been.
Yeah, and as he was watching the ball, like classic ball watching when you're running.
Yep.
As he was watching the ball, he was saying yes, 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 and Ross Taylor was running, and then Ross
Taylor basically ran too.
And then Will Young's just watching the ball, and he's like yes, 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 and then he turns around, he's like no, and then he turns around, and Ross Taylor's there, and again, that's a weird thing in this test. That's a key theme. There's a lot of weird shit. Also, a new test batsman still tripping out on batting in Test cricket. Like,
Yeah.
there's no explanation for his run out and then his almost run out of Ross Taylor. There's no like, what if you ask him, what are you doing? He would have been like, I just zoned out. And it's like, that's okay. Like, you're just learning how not to zone out in the fucking highest pressure environments of cricket. So just a lot of shit like that. To finish the podcast, how did this test fall into like the other Kiwi sports stuff of the past like week? Because you have basically outlined how the breakers suck. You've expressed the growing pains of the Wellington Phoenix women, and you've also highlighted Wellington Phoenix men struggling. Meanwhile, we've got Steven Adams like just on fire in the NBA. Memphis Grizzlies are on fire. A lot of Flying Kiwi stuff is going really well at the moment. It's hard for me to compare it to like cricket, domestic cricket, because it's not necessarily like following someone and their wins and losses. It's I was thinking like there's a weird vibe from this Blackcaps test, and there's just not too many weird vibes from domestic cricket. So I don't know how I can tie it into domestic cricket. But it's like, how do you just view this Blackcaps test among everything else that has happened over like the last week or so, with how some of the teams and athletes that we track fairly consistently have performed? Because I go back to like the intro and just starting 2022, everything's still a bit crazy. Everything's a bit like hostile, like old Sean Marks and the Brooklyn Nets. Like, just imagine being Sean Marks and you're like, okay, the world's fucking crazy. That's like, if your world isn't crazy enough, just put yourself in Sean Marks's boots, and he's trying to run a fucking NBA team during COVID and during like just all the mayhem that's happening there. So,
well, I haven't written about them all season. Like, can't get a line on it. It's just crazy stuff.
So how like just was maybe to put a question on to frame it, like, was the Blackcaps this test, was it in keeping with some of the other Kiwi sports stuff we've seen from the past week? Because to me, it didn't feel like the Blackcaps losing this test was a massive outlier in the Kiwi sports realm. It seems like the Kiwi sports realm right now is hot and cold. Like, there's not a lot of like neutrality, warmth, or just like room temperature. It's hot or cold. It's up or down. It's volatile. And that's just how Kiwi sports feels right now. Kind of summed up by the Blackcaps in this test as well.
Yeah. For the stuff that I cover, it's not even hot and cold. It's that's where the room temperature stuff, there is the room temperature water, but it's not, it's coming from the hot water that isn't hot enough. Like, it's cold or it's room temperature. There's nothing hot at the moment. Except for Steven Adams, because I am looking forward. I'm gonna next, like, 48 hours, I'm gonna churn out the fifth part and the fifth seasonal update on him. Probably a focus on his offensive rebounding. I normally have a theme for each one of those things. I'm thinking I'm looking at that. I'll just got to find like an angle to turn that into something. It might just be the angle that he's really bloody good at it. I'm just reminding people and going into a few, like, I don't know, scenarios where he gets them. I'll have a look at the some of the NBA has the NBA official website is amazing, because they have the on their stat things, you can go into like video scorecard type stuff, similar to and an equally excellent feature that New Zealand Cricket have on their website with the video scorecards and stuff. Just being able to like tap the thing, there's the wicket, sweet as, watch everybody's boundaries. Like, that's such a cool aspect to that. I love that. So I can just go through and look at all Steven Adams's offensive rebounds for the season and how that churns out. So it's something like that. I don't know, but I am looking forward to doing that, because he's playing really well and his team is playing really well, and that's such a like an oasis in the desert for me at the moment, because both Wellington Phoenix teams are on losing streaks. I've written about the Breakers, who are in absolute shambles and have been for several years, but in particular this year, because you sort of expect lessons to be learned from year to year to year, and yet they still, every year, it seems just like the biggest problem, I'm just talking purely on court here, biggest problem with the Breakers is that they make the same mistakes every time in terms of roster arrangement. and they sign players who can't necessarily play together and then expect to be able to just coach them into shape. And it hasn't worked at any point. The one time where they went on a nice winning streak, Dan Shamir's first season in charge, it was Scotty Hobson doing all the damage pretty much by himself with everyone else injured. It was just like one man being a superstar. Last I heard from him, he was on a 10-day contract in the NBA again. So shout out to that dude. But that's not necessarily an indication of the Breakers being on the right track. And what you see from them at the moment is like, where did like any team sport situation, the area where you can see good coaching and this fly, I swear to God, good coaching and structure and stuff.
You got to put some mindfulness into practice in those situations. Like we're all about practicality and living what we preach. When that fly
squash the bastard.
When that fly buzzes around you again, I just want a meditative namaste.
Yeah, just sort
situation. Especially don't kill the fly and don't swear, because you got to be about it. You got to be about it.
Yeah, well, the point on the Breakers is like where you see that structure and stuff is on defense, right? Like that's where you can see a team that's really well coached is going to be a good defensive team in pretty much every sport. Like every now and then you'll get the kamikaze team that just knows they can score more goals or more points or more tries, whatever, than the other team, and they're coached in a way to highlight that aspect of how they play. But generally speaking, the good defensive teams are the strong, like that's where you see that stuff coming into play. The Breakers are the worst defensive team in the NBL by about there's the second worst team. There's daylight. There's some more daylight. There's an entire night, and then the next day's daylight, and then there's the Breakers. Like they're that much worse than everyone else defensively. It's shocking, but see if they can start winning some games at some point. Wellington Phoenix did have a nice result in the FFA Cup, making it through to the semi-finals for the first time in their history. Needed penalty shootout to do it. Didn't really look like scoring a goal. A couple good chances that went awry during the thing. They're definitely holding on for a lot of the extra time period, but then young keep and phenom Alex Paulson makes 3 saves in the shootout, and they get through there with the victory. That's cool. Like I actually genuinely think I sort of, when I wrote about them, I ignored the FFA Cup run for the most part, just because it sort of feels like an aside to the A-League form. And it is like, it's cup stuff versus league stuff. They are different. You see all the time, like a Premier League team having a terrible run in the league, but they get on a run in the cup somehow, or vice versa. Like the best teams getting knocked out early in the cup, but they're going on to win the league by 20 points or whatever. Those things happens all the time. But I do think the manner of that was pretty timely for the Phoenix, and there is especially because what I see from them over the 4 games they've been losing is, as much as anything, a crisis of confidence. And so to have a big, spark it up kind of victory, yeah, we won on penalties. Our keeper was fantastic. Clean sheet over 120 minutes, even if it was against a team who almost their entire squad has had COVID over the last month, and they hadn't really played for ages, Melbourne City. But it's still a big morale boosting win for the Phoenix, and I think that hopefully can spark something good for the rest of the league stuff. Of course, if they lose 4-0 again, then that changes in a hurry. But yeah, man, and the Flying Kiwi stuff, which is going golden on the bigger picture, but the smaller picture week to week is that almost no one's playing at the moment. And the one guy who's sort of, well, I don't know if I'd say, because I didn't actually have him headlining this week, but for this reason, like Chris Wood and Burnley, like the headline act overall of Flying Kiwis is Chris Wood and what he does at playing at the highest level. But he's not been in good form lately, on account of his team's not been in good form lately. And it's getting harder and harder to see how Burnley won't get relegated this time if they don't change anything. It's gotten a little bit stale there. So that's a little depressing, and most other people just aren't playing at the moment. So the Steven Adams stuff is, and then the Blackcaps bloody lost. So the Steven Adams stuff is a nice timely shift for myself in the stuff that I'm covering at the moment. the Super Smash / Ford Trophy / Halliburton Johnson Shield beat right now is probably a lot happier than a lot of the football ones. I would hazard a guess. Just I don't think I need to hazard a guess. Actually, I think it's pretty clear.
Final thing: what are you learning about across these sports? And I'll give you my answer just to let you think about it, because I'm learning about it's not a first sighting, it's not a first land sighting of this lesson or this learning, but how players contribute to winning. And we can look at the Blackcaps and what I said about Will Young and Devon Conway, or you look at the Blackcaps as a whole, they are yet to win a World Test Championship game in this cycle. And much of our discussion with the Blackcaps was around players who contributed to winning. And that's how BJ Watling became a legend. And that is what is missing in this current team, as we've discussed ad nauseum throughout the podcast. If we look at Steven Adams and the Memphis Grizzlies, you have many elements that are contributing to Memphis winning games in the NBA. And from our Kiwi perspective, from our Aotearoa perspective, we know that a lot of what Steven Adams contributes to the Memphis Grizzlies is directly correlated to winning sports games. Like whether it's intangibles, whether it's a vibe, whether it's a next level, or just how you contribute to your team, winning is front and center for me in a lot of these sports competitions I'm following. You mentioned the Super Smash woman. You've got Wellington and Otago, who, yes, there are elements of their game where they are the best players. They score the most runs. They take the most wickets. They're also the best fielding teams. They're also teams with a lot of experience and youth. And it's about how the experience and the youth comes together with a fun atmosphere, a fun environment to win games. Super Smash Men is a far more even competition. So there's not exactly that clarity of winning lessons and that stuff evident in the Super Smash. But the big thing that I've been thinking about and learning about from watching a lot of Aotearoa sport over the past week is how players contribute to winning outside of the runs and wickets context in cricket, for example, or in the NBA with Memphis Grizzlies, how many points Ja Morant scores and how someone like Desmond Bain, his 3-point percentage and stuff like that, that is related to winning. But there's also stuff, and this just happens to be stuff that Steven Adams does, that is also important to winning. And these ideas have been evident across the Blackcaps, across the Super Smash, and across Steven Adams in the NBA. So is there anything that you've kind of learning thread across your sports that you can think of that you've been pondering, and that it's something that has just stuck with you that you have taken away from this past week or so?
Well, there was what's his name? Brad Jones, who's an assistant coach with the Memphis Grizzlies, mentioned something that got tweeted about by a few of the reporters who were listening in on this. When asked about Steven Adams, which reminds me a lot of what you're just saying. One I found here doesn't have an actual quote; it just says something along the lines of Jones said that Adams has turned the corner earlier on, and he was trying to feel his way with us, and now he's blah blah blah. It doesn't say what he said properly, but then it says he mentioned how Adams dominates games without scoring and doing glamorous things. He said that opposing coaches often come up to them talking about Adams, and I thought that, especially that, like the idea of being able to dominate a game without doing the thing that most people look for when they look for who is dominating a game, scoring the points, being able to have I think about this in football quite a lot, because when you're watching a game of football, like someone's going to score the goals, but usually it's the guys up front. So how do you judge a midfielder who's not necessarily there to like make last ditch tackles, winning headers in the box or whatever, or to score goals and set them up necessarily? And honestly, like one of the things I look for is just how often do I notice them? Like how involved are they? Especially with the young players, I want to see that. Like, even if they're making mistakes when they get on the ball, I don't care about that so much, because like the younger you are, the more time you've got to fix those things. I just want to see players who are having an impact on games. And thinking about that at like the highest level of basketball with Steven Adams, just like being able to be impactful without taking away from, because any shot that he takes is a shot that Ja Morant or Desmond Bane can't take. So being able to be impactful in a way that by definition there facilitates him alongside his like scorers is pretty amazing. And I suspect quite a rare thing. And you do know, like, I mean, I notice him more than anything because when I'm watching the Memphis Grizzlies play, I'm looking for him. But I think the way he's playing at the moment, like earlier on in the season, there was definitely a point where he was still working on those combinations, the chemistry and whatever. And he could be on the court for like a 3 or 4 minute stretch without you really noticing him. At the moment, you notice him because he's getting offensive rebounds every couple minutes. He is having that impact. And then just that point about like opposition coaches, like making a point when they're talking to their rivals, their their coaching comrades from the other team, them specifically bringing up Adams in conversation, because coaches are looking for very specific things, and so if they're seeing this more than anyone, they're seeing it a lot more than the fans are looking at home, because they're coming up with game plans that accommodate all these different ideas of how games can go. So like when other coaches are specifically bringing up Adams's name when they're talking about how the game went and stuff like that, that seems like a massive rap for him and his reputation. That's a lot of like, I don't necessarily know that's a lesson that I've learned from how he contributes to winning. I'd need to like ask those coaches exactly like, what is that impact? Like define the impact that he's having without scoring. Like go and break it down in details. I want to hear all that stuff. But a step below that is just them acknowledging that it exists, and that kind of thing is super interesting. I think that like tie into what you're saying quite a lot, is the ability to impact a game positively without doing the obvious things that people expect you to do to impact games positively. And then also to have opposition coaches noticing that, it seems rather fitting.
And to round it all off, like some of these Bangladesh players are legends now for how they contributed to win a test match.
Absolutely.
And that's like, we can get into stats, we can get into, runs and wickets and good performances and bad performances. But the thing that really elevates you and makes you a legend and makes you one of the best athletes teams in the world is winning. And that's what some of these Bangladesh dudes like Ebadot, fucking Mominal, Shanto, Das, lots of good names in that Bangladesh team as well. You got Shanto, Joy.
Sure. Yeah,
these
Joy.
dudes all helped Bangladesh win their first test in Aotearoa. So big it up, Bangladesh.
If Ebadot goes back to averaging 80 plus for the rest of his career, like if he just reverts to the bowler he was beforehand, which I don't think he will, because I think you've clearly seen like progress in his career and like skills being picked up working with his coaches and stuff like that. Also, he's a dude who, they kept talking about how he started as like a volleyball player in the Bangladeshi Air Force or something like that, which was crazy. And he won like some kind of bowling talent quest thing in order to like progress his career like that. Like obviously that guy has an unorthodox career path. If you have an unorthodox career path, he's probably like not had the refined coaching at a younger age that he might have otherwise, which is actually a really interesting point that McCullum said, because it ties into something you've written a couple times in the emails about the England cricket team. And he said something I hadn't really thought about, which was actually fascinating, because as soon as he said it, I'm like, that's a brilliant idea. And it's probably completely true, about how he thinks that England are maybe overcoaching themselves and like trying to play perfect technical cricket, and it's like taken away from their feel of the game, and they're just not being able to handle moments like that. I thought that was fascinating from Brendan McCullum. He said it a couple of times. But yeah, like someone like Ebadot with an unorthodox career path like that obviously has more room for quicker improvements when he gets to the top, because there's more things he can work on, and he's able to make that thing. But yeah, if he goes back to being like 80 runs per wicket again, rest of his career. He's always got this test match, he, regardless, like you can't take this moment, this event away from him. Though I will say he got all the highlights. I reckon Sharaful's going to be the best bowler of that lot. I'm super impressed with. He's like a tall Chaminda Vaas. He's not going to be Chaminda Vaas's like record. I shouldn't think so, but like that dude's a left armer who can move the ball around, and he's quite tall. He can hit the deck. Like that dude's got some talent. I looked him up. Like he was the top wicket taker and this is another point that I think it was mentioned a couple of times on commentary, but I haven't heard it a lot elsewhere. Like Bangladesh won the last under-19 World Cup. They didn't just like compete and get through they won the thing. And I think Sharaful was their top wicket taker in that tournament. He's only about 20 or 21 now. So this was 2 years ago when the last one was held. It was just before the pandemic. That's not a coincidence. It's like the fact that they picked young dudes, a few young guys come. I'm not sure if there were anyone else from that squad that was in this squad, but obviously if they've been able to win an under-19 World Cup, you don't just get all your good players coming along born between like a 2-year gap. Obviously there's like good players either side of that as well. So the fact that they did pick a younger team, maybe they had younger players who were ready to be picked as well as part of that. It's not just that they were forced into some of this, by like guys like Shakib not wanting to travel or whatever. Sure. But like also they had young guys ready to go and a generation of players that they're looking to push through who are very good and have proven this at youth level before. So another aspect to remember about the Bangladeshi team, I reckon.
And this is a note probably just for you, but we'll broadcast it for everyone. We can probably relax on the Shakib Al Hassan not touring New Zealand stuff in the future. He won't tour New Zealand again.
He's like 35, so he's not coming back.
Because it seems like every time Bangladesh have toured New Zealand, it's like, is Shakib playing or not? And if he is, it's going to be tricky. If he's not, happy days. Unfortunately, for anyone, I think the Shakib era is over and Bangladesh have a funky new team. And it'll be interesting. Obviously, we've got another test to go, but it will be interesting next time Bangladesh tour here, who's still in the team, which players kick on and all that stuff. But we do have another test to go in Christchurch, Hagley Oval. See what happens.
Return of the swing.
Return of the chit-chit. We'll wrap it up there. We'll be back next week with more podcasts. Make sure you sign up to the email. Extra yarns there tomorrow. And we'll be back with a Patreon podcast early next week as well. So big it up, big cheers. Stay beautiful. Enjoy the summer vibe. Cowabunga.